Good morning and welcome to Veterans Heartbeat, on the pulse of the veteran, where we discuss issues of health, happiness, opportunity, and well-being of interest to the veteran community, their families, and the community who honors them.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Veterans Heartbeat, brought to you by River, the Rural Institute for Veterans Education and Research. My name is Jason Zencraft and my co-host is Ed Lisowski. He is the Executive Director of River. We welcome you to a weekly wide-ranging discussion of issues, events, opportunities, and needs in our veteran community. Morning, Ed. How are you doing?
Good morning, Jason.
So, we'd like to start off by thanking our sponsors, the Man Shop. It's a great place for a guy to get a haircut. If you need a haircut, swing on by and check them out. The gals there do a great job. We are also sponsored by River, the Rural Institute for Veterans Education and Research. They offer many services to veterans, such as free weekly TBI and vestibular disorder testing, educational programs that focus on veterans helping veterans, and many others. So today we're going to go over finances, more specifically problems, consequences, and solutions regarding finances. We have John Strong with us, a financial advisor at SG Long & Company, located at 283 West Front Street in Missoula, Montana. He is here to speak with us about veterans issues concerning finances. He is a former Army officer and works with veterans as part of his practice. Hey, John, how you doing?
Good, Jason. How you doing today?
Oh, not too shabby. Glad you could make it. So what do you have for us?
Yeah, first off, I want to tell you guys I appreciate you having me on. So veterans issues are pretty dear and near to my heart, and I think that one of the biggest things that a lot of times we overlook when people are transitioning out is the financial impact that veterans are going to face. One of the biggest things that we look at with that is the loss of income. A lot of the time when veterans are in, they're looking, or when military members are in, they're looking at their base pay and their allowances and everything like that, and they look at that bottom line, and it doesn't look so great. Soldiers and airmen are not necessarily making as much as they really feel like they deserve, which is true. However, when you step out into the civilian world, the impact of that income going away is pretty significant. Things like non-taxable benefits that now you have to pay for have a huge impact on your bottom line. And so when a veteran transitions out from the military into civilian life, most of the time they take a huge pay cut, which isn't necessarily what they expect at that time.
Yeah, but not.
No, and then add on to that the extra expenses that come along with it. Everything from health care, which you can look across the community and say, yeah, there's some VA health care there, but that's not necessarily going to fit for everybody, and it might not cover it. It
takes away the family benefits, too.
Absolutely, Ed. That's a great point. And then everything from there to we're looking at gym memberships, the increased expense of goods. If you don't have a commissary or a PX nearby, BX.
Well, just like our sponsor, the Man Shop, they do a great job, and they're not that expensive. What is it, a $12 haircut? Which is very inexpensive in the community. On the base, you can get a haircut for $250 sometimes. So,
yeah, there's a huge change there as well. And then all the other family services, like Ed had mentioned earlier, whether there's some sort of counseling needs or anything like that, now you're paying out of pocket where beforehand it was covered through a program.
Yeah.
So, and then even looking at the lower enlisted who had to stay in the barracks, well, that is free housing. Those are air quotes. Not everybody can see the housing part.
I'm not sure you could call it housing, but hey.
Right? Or the dining facility. Once again, air quotes food. But having to go and pay for all that does add drastically to that bottom line. So those are one of the biggest issues that we see with veterans transitioning out.
Oh, okay. Are there any other problems that vets seem to experience when they go from such a structured environment, from the military, everything's right there, you go here, you eat this time, and then suddenly they're back in the civilian world, and they have to pay for all these things, and it's not, I eat at this time, and it's going to be this meal. Are there any other problems that you see veterans come up with? Yeah,
that's a great question. One of the biggest ones is actually the consistency of the paychecks. And the timing, on the 1st and the 15th, or if you use some banks, no plugs here, the 30th and the 14th, there will be a paycheck hitting your bank account that you know exactly how much that's going to be. and that's going to come from beforehand. It's the same every month until you make rank, and then, of course, it goes up. There's also, you can see out into the future, if you project it a little bit, what your earnings are going to be in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years, as you make rank, as you make time in service. Where on the civilian world, a lot of time that's not the case. If you're working an hourly job, if you get 40 hours, you know what your paycheck's going to be. But what happens if something happens, you get 34, or another week you get 42? That inconsistency a lot of time can wreak havoc with veteran finances as well.
So, John, you've been working with the Rural Institute. You've come up with a class program that we're going to be offering for veterans for free, and it's going to be an online live program. Can you tell us a little more about that program?
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So the program's going to be in 4 modules, 30 to 45 minutes each. And really what it's going to do is it's going to take from step 1 of the basic no financial knowledge to getting somebody on some sort of solid footing. So we'll start with how to make a budget, kind of being able to take a look at your situation currently and how to improve that. We'll look at credit, and we'll also look into where you can go from after that. Ideas of how to save, what that looks like, risk management, so whether that's insurance or some sort of emergency savings account. And then at the last module we'll look at there will be different types of investment accounts, just general knowledge on how to get started.
So with that class, it sounds like what they're going to have is some of the basics that they used to get when they were out processing. But from what we're seeing, a lot of the out processing is check the box, they're moving on. So a lot of these guys are coming out not really prepared for reentry or reintegration. Do you see that causing a lot of problems in your job?
Absolutely, Ed. Having a strong financial foundation when you make the transition is going to help you out for years and years in the future. What we're seeing a lot of the time is people are coming out and immediately digging themselves into a hole, and then it's taking them 5 years plus to be able to overcome that. And with this class, the idea there is to hopefully either shorten that time frame to maybe a 2-year hole or no hole at all.
With the backlog of cases within the VA system, when they come out, a lot of these guys are putting in for claims, and it takes about a year or so sometimes, maybe longer. So they'll back pay them to the date of their claim. So they'll walk away with a huge, what they would consider a huge windfall of maybe $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. I've had cases where we've worked. One guy got a check for $171,000. With that being the case, how do these guys that are coming out with these windfalls, and then they get a small check every month, but I've seen them just waste that money. I mean, they'll buy ridiculous things.
The idea there is that if we can get them to look out ahead of time and make a plan for that money when it comes in, that, $171,000, if you have a plan in place before you get that money and you just plug it straight into what you want to do, then that way you're going to see a lot more success on reaching goals. Things like possibly purchasing a home and goals like that a lot of people have.
I recently sat down and talked finances, and even a small investment of $5,000 plus adding a couple $100 a month for a guy in his 30s can add up to a healthy retirement. Am I correct?
You are correct. If you can find it online a lot of different places that'll show compounding charts and just the importance of getting money saved early. And it does. It adds up to be a lot of time considerable amounts of money.
And another thing to keep in mind with this class that John's going to be putting on, it'll be open to any veteran who wants to tune in and listen to it. If you want to get more information about it, go ahead and visit riverofchange.org, and there'll be something posted up soon on how to get onto that class or come in person.
Yeah, and a couple other things we'll do with that too, Jason, is we'll have some worksheets for people to go ahead and work through, whether it's a budget worksheet or something like that. We'll also have some time for students to reach out and have a phone call if they need to with myself, sit down. We'll do some in-class stuff. And that way it is hopefully a little bit more interactive to where as the students come up with questions, they'll be able to get some pretty positive guidance immediately on it.
Another issue that the veterans are facing is employment, of course. And it was really interesting in talking with financial people on how you can teach them how to look for the right job. Sometimes taking a job that's $1 an hour less can actually be more effective if you use the right tools. Is that correct?
That is correct. It kind of goes back again to having the plan in place, and it's where you want to end up. Everybody has to start somewhere, and somebody has to start at the bottom. And a lot of time you'll see that if you are able to start in positions that do feed into higher paying positions later on, that it will be more advantageous than taking a job where you're just going to be stuck at either a certain salary or a certain rate for the rest of your life.
So, John, some of the things that I've seen in the counseling that I've done with the veterans, they get themselves into trouble with their credit, with bills, and actually I've seen where the choice program where they go in for doctor's visits and whatnot, hospitals especially, and the VA doesn't pay, then all of a sudden they're stuck with that bill. So now they have this bill and they're being sued and everything else. What are some of the things that you can say to mitigate that? Because if they've got a plan in place, they've got money laid aside, all of a sudden that money could disappear.
Yeah. So one of we call that risk management or risk mitigation. For everybody out there that right now just cringed because they have to do a risk management worksheet. I'm sorry about that. So expenses that pop up like that and different types of credit issues a lot of time can be resolved with some sort of emergency savings account out front. And that's generally what we try to use that for, and being able to have enough set aside ahead of time to get there. And that doesn't really help if you're already out of money and trying to play catch up. And that's when it becomes a lot more difficult. So once again, if we can try to get ahead of the issue, it's always going to prove to be a lot more successful than trying to play catch up at the end.
A couple of episodes ago, we had Mike Garcia on, and we were talking about the issues within the VA and the choice program. And one of the issues that came up was the fact that sometimes a veteran will end up with a hospital bill choice wasn't paying that they should have paid. So now they're being sued. Is there things that you can recommend as a financial advisor to help the individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to try to avoid something like that or to solve it is always to have some sort of savings up front, which may not always happen to be the case, but that's once again going back to the plan. Afterwards, if it's too late and you've already are going through that issue where maybe you haven't paid that bill or you're being sued or something like that, there are ways to contact the hospitals and work through that. I know the VA also will help out a lot of the time with that negotiation. They have some counselors that'll help out with that.
So it's good to get a hold of the VA and see if they'll work with you.
Absolutely. If you're not able to cover it yourself, that's always a great resource to turn to.
A lot of the guys coming out of the military, they had a steady stream of income. They knew where they were. They could do their budgets. And now a lot of times it's a lot harder to go in and figure out your budget because, like you say, the income may go up and may go down. Are there strategies about going into debt and how to make sure that you're doing that responsible?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of time, like you were talking about, Ed, you'll see veterans that are now in the trades maybe doing something like concrete or roofing, where here in Montana that is extremely seasonal. And so the summer paychecks might be huge, working 50, 60 hours a week. And then in the winter, it might be 10, 0, 20 hours a week sort of thing. When concerning debt's a tough issue. There's a couple trains of thought about debt, whether there's good debt and bad debt. I would generally try to to minimize your debt as much as you can. Just having to pay back money every month with an interest rate a lot of time will hurt your finances over the long term. Now, that being said, there are some instances where debt does make sense. It's pretty hard to buy a house, especially here in Missoula, where the average house price is $250,000 with cash. So there are instances where the management of debt may be beneficial.
So managing debt is something that we really need to be watching, because the consequences of that I've seen as a crisis counselor can be very, very drastic. We've had and lost several veterans in Montana, and that's why this is such an important topic, because of the stress and the anxiety over the debt.
Yeah, absolutely. Just those monthly payments, a lot of time you'll see individuals may have 2 or 3 cars, and once you start adding up those car payments, maybe some credit card payments, and their mortgage, and they're having more going out to debt payments than they're making, and that's just going to snowball upon itself. And just the situation's not going to get better if you owe more and you have more going out than you're making. And of course, the stress and the anxiety just builds month after month, and sometimes even to the point where, veterans take their own lives.
Family members reap the consequences of both good and bad financial planning. College is a big one for the family members that have got kids. Can you recommend some strategies around that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best ways to be able to afford college is college choice. And if you look a lot of time, you can go ahead and pull up any school. Since we're here in Missoula, I'll use the University of Montana. There's 2 different price structures they have. They have out-of-state and in-state. If you take a look, there's a fairly significant difference between the 2 of them. There's also other options available, such as community colleges, CLEP tests. There's AP classes that students can take during high school, and all of that's able to lower the cost of college. And so that's, I would say, is the biggest strategy that you can employ, is trying to get the overall cost of college down as far as you can. There's also many scholarships. Some are school-specific. Others are you can find online that might be open to any school. Community scholarships are a huge one, Ed. Things that are offered by community, maybe couples or foundations, that may be only a couple $100, but if you can get a couple of those, you're looking at a substantial chunk of change. Another great resource that I personally like to look at is raise.me. That's a website, and they do what's called micro scholarships. What they do is this student, and it has to be a high school student, can go in and input things like their classes, their grades, any sort of leadership opportunity they've had, sports teams, etc. And what will happen is then they'll be awarded these micro scholarships, which are generally between $25 and $100 for activities by certain schools. I haven't been able to get on and look and see what all schools are in there, but I have had a couple. My nephews told me about it, and they said it's great. Oh. So that's another good one. There's also savings vehicles. There's what's called a 529 or a ESA, which is Educational Savings Account, or also known as a Coverdale. And those are great resources available as well. And they're generally, you're generally able to start with something as low as $25 in and $25 a month. And you'll see substantial assets being built in that as well.
I know a lot of people will have a lot of different spending that isn't necessary. A lot of frivolous spending where they'll look back and say, it cost me this much to live every month. And they look back, crap, I spent $300 on toys and my kid doesn't even like them, or whatever it may be. So a budget helped me out a lot. How can a budget help veterans who may be experiencing some of those issues?
I think you pretty much just worded it, is that you're not having frivolous spending. It's a spending plan. So it's you telling your money what to do and taking control of your money. And a lot of the time, if you're not taking control of your money, you're just spending what you have in your account, waiting for that next check to come in, and then spending it there. Now, if you start at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the month with a plan on where every dollar is going, you'll see a lot higher success in, cutting down on the frivolous spending. Now, you can still build in budgets for toys or eating out and things like that. It just kind of helps keep you in check.
A lot of veterans coming out have a skill set such as you had mentioned, like roofing and whatnot. So they're going to be putting in and putting their own business together. And statistically, the small business is where all the employment is. Can you address avenues and tools that you could use to help start your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Small Business Administration does a very good job of helping veterans. They have a couple programs available. Along kind of with the personal debt that we're talking about, the good and bad debt, the lower you can keep your debt and probably the more minimal you can keep your debt payments, the higher chance of success you'll have, because there will be issues with cash flows. There will be issues with having to hire, and you're going to see, a drop in production during maybe certain months.
Out of all of the crisis work that we've done at River, finances are probably either number one or number two. So from what we're hearing from you is it's time to get yourself a plan. It's like driving to New York. If you don't know that you're driving to New York, you might end up somewhere else. So if an individual wants to put together a plan, the classes are a good start. What else can they do for the planning?
So after the classes, another great way to do it is to do a little bit of self-education. There's plenty of reading. There's podcasts. There's different sorts of radio programs out there, like this great one, that offer a lot of education to help you continue the next step. There's also a lot of professionals out there through the workforce that do work in this space.
So you're saying seek out a professional?
Yes, absolutely.
Are they expensive to hire a professional?
So professionals do range all the way across. There are a lot of professionals out there that do charge a considerable amount of money, depending on how their practice is structured and who they work with. There also are a lot that don't. There's a lot of counseling available if you're kind of in that phase of life. There's also a lot of financial advisors that are affordable for everyone.
How do I know if this person is steering me in the right direction? Because I may not be able to afford the most expensive, but I want to make sure that the person I have is going to guide me correctly.
Yeah. Just kind of like how you go to find any other professional, whether it's a doctor, dentist, all the way through. I would base it off of somebody that you trust, who they recommend as a good starting point. And then you would like to go and talk to a couple of them. You want to also be able to click with the person that you're working with, because the highest chance of your plan working is if you're working with somebody that you like and that it takes your input and puts that into the plan as well.
So just because he's a professional doesn't mean that you have to accept the advice, and you can always find another person.
Absolutely. You do not need to accept their advice if you do not feel like it fits your personal situation. It's like a doctor. If you don't like your diagnosis, you can always go get a second opinion and make sure that the advice that you're receiving makes sense for you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning, John. I'm sure the listeners gathered a lot of good information regarding financing. If you have any questions or would like clarification, you can reach John at 406-721-0999. Thank you very much for listening to Veterans Heartbeat. We would not be able to bring it to you without all the support of the listeners. Thank you again to the Man Shop for sponsoring the show. If you need a great haircut, swing by and get a snip. Also, thank you to our main sponsor, River, the Rural Institute for Veterans Education and Research. They have an array of services such as veterans-focused education, a free TBI and vestibular clinic, and many more services. Check them out on Facebook or on the web at riverofchange.org. Lastly, we would like to show our appreciation to all of our veterans. Thank you for serving our country and keeping us safe.